Good morning. I'm Scott Wiener. I have the honor of representing San Francisco and northern San Mateo County in the California State Senate, and I'm the author of Senate Bill 1228, our legislation to protect sexual assault survivors' right to privacy in their DNA. Sexual assault is among the most traumatic events that any person can ever experience, and we must do everything in our power to support and protect survivors who make the brave decision to come forward. I want to thank our district attorney, Chesa Boudin, for discovering the practice of our police department in terms of misuse of this rape kit DNA so that we can fix this problem. And thank you for joining us here today. We know that federal law already prohibits the inclusion of victims' DNA in the DNA index. So it was shocking to learn that there is no corresponding California law to prohibit local law enforcement databases from retaining the DNA from victims in their local databases, from retaining it and for years searching it and potentially using that rape kit DNA to implicate the victim in a future investigation. It is completely unacceptable to misuse DNA that a survivor has provided against that survivor. Let's be clear, sexual assaults are beyond traumatic. And for a survivor to then make the brave choice of coming forward, going to the hospital, engaging in a very invasive physical examination, that takes enormous courage. And to signal to survivors that if you take that step to come forward, then that decision may be used against you in the future. It is one more barrier and one more reason for sexual assault survivors not to come forward, and we are all less safe as a result. We need to do everything in our power to encourage survivors to come forward and to make clear that we support them and that we'll protect them. Senate Bill 1228 will make sure that this misuse of victim DNA never happens again in the state of California. So now I'd like to invite up the sponsor of this legislation, San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin.
Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you also to Senator Skinner, to Sarah Metz, the Director of the Trauma Recovery Services at UCSF, to Tina Rodriguez from Valor, to Christine Soto DeBerry from the Prosecutors Alliance of California, to all of our speakers today. Also want to acknowledge the principal co-author, Assemblymember Phil Ting from San Francisco. Senate Bill 1228 is about public safety. It's about honoring and supporting and respecting victims of some of the most horrific violent crimes known to our city, to our state, and to our world. The reality is, as Senator Wiener already indicated, that sexual assaults are one of the most underreported categories of crime, one of the categories of crime that are the most difficult to prosecute. And barriers to reporting make them all the more challenging for folks in my office to address. The San Francisco District Attorney's Office is proud of our record prosecuting sexual assault, and we are committed to doing everything in our power to hold people who cause harm, who commit crimes, who use sexual violence accountable. To do that, we need survivors of sexual assault to feel safe coming forward and reporting what they've experienced. We need them to trust law enforcement partners so that they will cooperate with investigations and with prosecutions. I want to just take a moment and reflect on how courageous, on how heroic the survivors, mostly women, are after a sexual assault, after surviving the unthinkable, to call the police, to submit their body to an invasive evidentiary gathering process, only to then have their trust in the system betrayed when law enforcement preserves their DNA profile in a database and uses it for years to come for reasons totally unrelated to the consent that they provided, totally unrelated to holding the person who harmed them accountable, and indeed, in some instances, uses it against the very survivor who had that courage to come forward. Not on my watch. We must do better. We will do better 1228 will guarantee that neither in San Francisco nor anywhere in the state of California will law enforcement agencies be allowed to save DNA evidence gathered from victims of sexual assault and save that DNA in a database for use that's unrelated to prosecuting and holding accountable the perpetrator of that sexual violence. We discovered back in February of this year a practice that is totally unacceptable, a practice that had been going on for years in the San Francisco Police Department Crime Lab, a practice that creates yet more barriers and deterrents to sexual assault survivors coming forward and reporting. It was a practice that we learned later included storing DNA profiles of children who had been victims of sexual assault, storing DNA profiles of people related to and in the families of survivors of sexual assault, of building a database of the kind, as Senator Wiener said, the federal authorities explicitly prohibit. And we were shocked at this practice. We only learned of it accidentally, coincidentally, because of a case that we were prosecuting against a woman who had had the courage to come forward and cooperate in a case where she had been victimized years earlier. We immediately took action. We immediately called for action. And I want to acknowledge and thank Senator Wiener's leadership on this issue, immediately standing up and stepping up to author this legislation, which I'm proud to co-sponsor, and which I hope will send a simple, clear message to survivors of sexual assault everywhere. We see you, we hear you, we stand with you, and we will do everything in our power to protect you, to help you heal, and to hold those who have harmed you accountable. Senate Bill 1228 is a critical step in the right direction. I'm a proud co-sponsor, and I want to thank all of the other speakers for being here today to help ensure that we can do a better job going forward by those who have survived the most horrific crimes that anyone can imagine. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite up one of our co-authors on the bill and our great colleague from the East Bay, Senator Nancy Skinner.
Thank you so much, Senator Wiener. I'm really proud to stand here with Senator Wiener as a co-author of SB 1228 and with DA Bodine and the other supporters, because this is an essential and important bill. DNA from rape victims should never be used to try to arrest or charge that victim with another crime. It's morally wrong and it's bad for public safety. Rapes and sexual assaults are already underreported. We've heard that from my colleagues. Less than 20% of rape victims are now willing to go to law enforcement and report their assault. What happens if you don't go to law enforcement and you don't report your assault? It supports rapists. It continues to allow a rapist, a person who perpetrates sexual assault, to continue. So, any system that discourages rape victims from coming forward is a system that supports rapists, and that is wrong. Victims feel shame. We know well that it is so common for a victim of rape or sexual assault to feel like somehow they contributed to that circumstance. It was somehow their fault, or that they will not be believed. And unfortunately, we have years of law enforcement not taking such crimes seriously enough and leaving the evidence for those people that come forward and get subjected to the full hospital bodily removal of everything in order to get that evidence for the proof of that sexual assault in something called a rape kit, which I think is a ridiculous term. But we know that for years, that evidence sat on shelves and wasn't even taken seriously. We want that evidence taken seriously, but we don't want it used against victims. So, the shame and fear about reporting your assault will only deepen if you feel that coming forward will just lead to an experience of law enforcement treating you as a criminal. So I'm very proud to co-author 1228. It sends a clear message to every victim of sexual assault. Law enforcement is here to protect you, not to re-victimize you. And we are clear, nothing should stand in the way of each and every sexual assault victim from coming forward and cooperating with police so that we can catch and prosecute rapists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Skinner, for those important words. Want to next introduce Dr. Sarah Metz, who is the Director of the Division of Trauma and Recovery Services at UCSF, a critical partner in addressing the harm caused by sexual assault and other violent crime. Dr. Metz?
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. And what a day for this to be happening, actually, as we have Survivors Speak happening here on the same grounds. And I'm here today as a mental health professional to talk about the impact of sexual assault. And I think, as many have said, it is exceedingly traumatic and the impact runs deep. And for many folks, when they experience a sexual assault, unfortunately, that's not the first time that they've experienced interpersonal violence. And so being able to work towards eliminating barriers to survivors to seeking care, whether that care is medical care, forensic evidence collection, mental health care, or even seeking to report the crime, doing whatever we can as a community to support survivors in eliminating those barriers is exceedingly important. And so feel really grateful to be part of a community that shares that value in eliminating those barriers to survivors going on the path of healing that works for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Metz, for your words and for your work. I next want to introduce Tina Rodriguez, the president of the board of Valor, an organization doing critical work on behalf of survivors of sexual assault and raising awareness and providing voice to those who all too often have been stripped of their voice. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tina Rodriguez, board president of Valor, California's statewide organization for sexual assault. Thank you. I come here today to tell you that we are in full support of this bill. We represent activists, advocates, prevention practitioners, community-based organizations, rape crisis centers, and sexual assault survivors. We will not stand silent with this type of exploitation. This exploitation contributes to the oppression and discouragement of survivors coming forward, and one of the most humiliating and shameful experiences. The reason why sexual assault remains underreported and the darkest figure of crime is because of this type of response. This type of response lacks equity, empathy, and clearly criminalizes victims. I want to share with you that this is not only harmful, it is detrimental to others. It sends other victims a message that this is what will happen if you come forward. And we will not stand for that. In addition to that, California's DNA collection legislature was passed for survivors who choose to come forward for prosecution, not to be misused. I want to share with you that we will continue to advocate, to raise our voices for survivors. And to survivors that are listening to this message, I tell you this: Valor will stand with you, we will elevate your voices, and we will discourage this type of exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Our next speaker is Christine DeBerry, the Executive Director of the Prosecutors Alliance of California. Prosecutors Alliance is an organization that Christine founded, an organization that champions common sense policies and reforms like SB 1228 that build trust between communities and law enforcement, that make us safer. Christine, we're honored to have you with us today.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here with Boudin and Senators Wiener and Skinner. I'm Christine Soto DeBerry, the Executive Director of the Prosecutors Alliance. We're an organization committed to assisting survivors and victims of crime heal from the harm they experience, building safe communities, and finding justice through equitable, humane approaches to criminal justice. We have over 3,000 members that are prosecutors, victim advocates, and allies across the state of California who unite their voices to speak on issues like the one we're here talking about today. SB 1228 was something we did not know was happening in San Francisco, and we're fearful may be happening in other communities around this state. We can all imagine somebody that has been sexual assaulted having to get up the courage to go to a police station and tell a room full of strangers what has just happened to them. And that the response to that appropriately from law enforcement is that we would like to collect the DNA from your body so that we can find the person and hold them accountable. A critical step, and probably the reason that this person went to the police in the first place. And to go through that very invasive process, and as Dr. Metz and Ms. Rodriguez have both explained, an exceptionally traumatic experience, not one that is developed and formulated around the survivor and his or her needs, but one that is developed around evidence collection that can be quite intrusive and hard for that person. But they do it bravely because they want to make sure that there's accountability for the person that caused them this very serious harm. And I guarantee you they want to be sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. And when they make that pact with us and trust in law enforcement to make that invasive procedure possible, we must respect and protect their privacy in that process. There is no excuse for doing anything other than what the victim or survivor have permitted us to do in that moment. None. SB 1228 will help us stop the practice of using victims' DNA to attempt to incriminate them in other activity. It is reprehensible. It is re-traumatizing to victims. It is sending the message that you should not report your crime if you have ever made a mistake in your own life or may make one in the future. And it is enforced inequitably. We must end it. I'm proud to stand here with the sponsors and the authors of this legislation and the many prosecutors who support this. I'm thankful for DA Boudin for catching this egregious practice, calling it to light, working on local legislation to stop it in San Francisco, and going beyond to say that he wanted to make sure victims across the state of California were protected. That is an important leadership voice in prosecution, and I'm proud to stand with him and everyone here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for your words and for your advocacy. We now have time for questions, if there are any from the public. For folks who couldn't hear, the question is whether there are examples of this happening beyond San Francisco. The short answer is yes, there are examples. We learned of this practice because of one particular property crime case where the suspect that we were prosecuting had been identified using her own DNA from a sexual assault experience years earlier. That was back in February. We immediately started looking into this practice, trying to understand how widespread it was, and we were told that it was a standard practice in San Francisco and potentially in crime labs far beyond San Francisco. We know that the San Francisco Police Department is still engaged in an audit trying to identify other cases that may have been similarly impacted and tainted by this practice. We know there are many, many other cases, probably thousands, where searches of unknown DNA have been done against DNA profiles in databases based entirely or in part on victims' and survivors' DNA. To the heart of your question, we know for certain that this has been a practice as far away as Massachusetts, where there was a crime lab doing almost exactly the same thing. It similarly, good to see you, Senator. It was similarly called out by advocates. It was similarly raised to the attention of the state legislature and is being addressed there. As far as whether there are specific other instances in the state of California, I have personally reached out to other elected district attorneys, asked them, urged them to look into the practice to ensure that they are doing everything in their power to ensure sexual assault survivors can trust the process when they come forward. And I know that there are audits and investigations happening far beyond San Francisco. Any other questions? Yeah. We learned, for folks who couldn't hear the question, the two-part question. The first one was how exactly we learned of the DNA in this case coming from a rape kit. And the second part is whether me coming to Sacramento is related in any way to the recall. The first question is that every investigation the police bring us, and let me take a step back even further, every new case that my office files, every criminal case, is brought to us by a law enforcement investigative agency. In this instance, as in most cases we file, it's the San Francisco Police Department. When they bring us a case, they give us a packet, a police report, lab reports, witness statements, photos, videos, their full investigation. This particular case was initiated by way of a police arrest warrant, an affidavit under penalty of perjury laying out details, attaching documents. And within those documents, within that affidavit, it was clear where the DNA match had come from, a database we didn't actually know had existed. When we took a close look at the documents, the packets, the timeline, we were shocked, we were horrified. Frankly, it was hard to believe that a practice so clearly abusive of the trust of survivors of sexual assault could be in place and could have been in place for years. We reached out to the crime lab. We learned that, yes, in fact, it was standard practice, and we took action to raise awareness, to change the law, to make it crystal clear, both to law enforcement partners and, most importantly, to survivors of sexual assault, that their trust will never be abused when they come forward and cooperate. As for your second question, I'm focused every single day on doing the right thing, on making San Francisco safer, on finding ways to ensure that we're putting the justice back in the criminal justice system. This issue, unfortunately, came to our attention in February. I wish it had never been an issue. I wish no survivor of sexual assault had ever had their trust in law enforcement abused and violated in this way. When we learned about it, we did the only thing consistent with our values, consistent with the law, consistent with public safety, and that is we raised awareness. We joined forces with allies and other champions of survivors of sexual assault, like all of the folks standing with me today, like Senator Wiener, who introduced this legislation, and we're going to fight as hard as we can to ensure that survivors of sexual assault know we stand with them and support them. The question is whether we know if anybody has ever been prosecuted and convicted with this practice in San Francisco or beyond. We know at least of the case from February where there was a prosecution filed. A woman was jailed on the basis of her own DNA that she had provided years earlier. That one case was more than enough for me. Knowing that that case existed and that the database at issue included child survivors of sexual assault DNA was more than enough for us to spring into action to try and remedy the situation. If it happened once, and if it's a database that we know has been in existence since at least 2015 in San Francisco, it's hard to imagine that the case at issue here in February was the first case. I think that's all we have time for. I want to thank everybody for coming. I especially want to thank the author of this legislation, Senator Wiener. I want to thank Senator Skinner for making time to join us today, and all of our speakers for their words, for their presence, for their advocacy, and for championing public safety and the rights of survivors of sexual assault. Thank you all.